even when other people don't agree with them. But when you make these choices from a place that is A, from love for yourself, B, from a respect for your time and energy, the value of your time and energy, and with that, an understanding of what you can do for the world in your way with that time and energy, then you get an opportunity to make these choices that aren't just from obligation and that aren't coming from a fear of the shame that you'll feel on the other side of them.
Hello, my beautiful friends. My name is Dr. Becc.
And I am Kristeen Barker, and this is Am I Doing It Wrong? A podcast for doctors by doctors. Dr. Becc is a mindset coach and medical doctor who specialises in liberating driven, professional women from the limitations of perfectionism, imposter syndrome, and people pleasing. She's basically the cheat code for getting out of your own way, showing up authentically, and living a life you're proud of.
And Kristeen is a medical educator and nephrologist who creates resources for doctors in training that I truly think are an unfair advantage. She makes complex topics super simple and takes the pain and uncertainty out of passing your medical exams. Kristeen and I connected a few years ago via our online platforms, and over the years we've discussed countless highs, lows, and in-betweens of doctor life. And in doing so, we've experienced firsthand the power of vulnerable conversations to show us where we're getting in our own way and underestimating our capacity.
So we want you to be part of the conversation and experience these same results. Every week on the pod, we'll be bringing you conversations which shine light in dark places, normalise the doctor journey, ease unnecessary suffering, and give you actionable steps to thrive in all facets of your life. So grab a cuppa and get cozy for this week's episode of Am I Doing It Wrong? The podcast for doctors by doctors.
All right, my beautiful friends, our doctor humans, welcome to this episode. And this one's going out to all of our busy doctors, i.e. every doctor everywhere. Welcome. We see you. Now, Kristeen and I have a problem, which is we are so upset that so many doctors are suffering so much in their lives. You guys work so hard. You have worked so hard your whole life, and you continue to work so hard in service of all of our communities. And with that, the sacrifice can often be that it takes from you. It takes from you because our work just takes a sheer large amount of hours, and also because the work we do is quite exhausting. And so the typical self-care advice, it just really doesn't apply to a lot of doctors. And it's not to say there's not so much to gain from self-care advice from other people. And I love opening my mind to hearing about what other people are doing recently, lately, or what they've done in the past, or what they're planning to do in the future. I love to have those ideas sparked in me because, at different times of the year, at different eras of my life, different things work for me. So we highly encourage you guys to listen and be inspired by what other people are doing at different times. And for today's episode, Kristeen and I want to do just that for you, but specifically with a focus on self-care exercises, self-care practices that don't take you any time. And bonus, some exercises that actually, or some self-care practices that actually save you time. They give you extra time back. And all of these exercises are going to give you more energy back. All of these practices are going to give you more energy back. So 2 thought errors that I just want to throw out at the start of this episode. One is that you don't have enough time for self-care. I am guilty of thinking that myself. And in Kristeen and my last episode, we just spoke about how over the last couple of weeks or period of time in our lives, we have been deprioritizing some of these self-care practices that are really great for us and we know are great for us. And instead, we've been hitting the override button and numbing, disconnecting with ourselves in the name of just getting through and trying to get more productive outputs done, trying to be more productive. But we want to bring these practices to your attention today to remind you that self-care doesn't have to take time. Self-care can be something that can be done in the moments of your day where nobody's even aware that you're doing anything differently. And they can even be practices that actually give you your time back. So very important. You might find yourself in the same position as Kristeen and I have been, which is that we've been hitting the override button too much, and it's time to get back to some really powerful reconnecting self-care practices and habits in our lives. Or you might have the brilliant self-awareness to recognize you're going in that direction. You're starting to slip and you need to double down on your self-care a little bit more, but you don't have time. Well, today's episode is for you.
And we cannot wait to share some of these. These are my absolute go-tos. And like Becc was saying in the last episode, you hear about our recent meltdown and my recent meltdown when I just had to get away from myself. And it's really come to the front of my mind what self-care techniques I use, but also how to not get myself into that place again if I can help it. Because I've ended up there a few times, but I didn't want to be there, and these things will really help you guys. So one of my absolute favorites, and this one I think some of you will find controversial, so why not start there? But for the most amount of years, I can't remember exactly when this started, I do not watch the news. I do not watch the news. I have no idea what's going on in the world, and I am happier for it. I don't mind. I'm not missing out. I don't have that problem. And things that are important find their way to you. People talk about things that are fairly relevant, but you miss out on all of the over dramatized stuff. Because if you think about it, the news is trying to get your attention, and they want you to feel a feeling of fear and anxiety. So you go back and watch the news and find out, what's happening in the world again. They're trying to get you to go back there for their own reasons. And so I made the decision many years ago not to watch the news. And it does sort of, when I say this to people, they sometimes find it a little bit unusual, or they kind of worry that I'm going to come across as, I guess, less intelligent or stupid or something. But honestly, I've been with patients, and patients have asked me if I've heard about something on the news. And I literally just say to them, oh, I don't watch the news. It makes me sad. I feel better when I don't watch the news. And they can totally accept that. Like, I don't think anyone can contest that, really. So that would be my number one hack. So it's time saving, I guess. If you're not watching the news, you get the opportunity to do something else, but you're not getting all that negative energy, and you get to choose the lens through which you would like to look at the world more deliberately. It's my favorite.
Making the choice in your life, doing whatever you can in your life to think more intentionally. That's like my heart and soul. It's one of my guiding values. Think on purpose, just because, as exactly what you're saying with the news is, there is an agenda behind the news, and they're trying to direct us in, there aren't, dare I say, there's certainly not the news outlets that you see on TV. They are simultaneously a business. They need to stay profitable. They need to serve their stakeholders. They've got other intentions besides from just neutrally informing us, giving us the information that we need. So do, even you think about newspapers or journalists and so on, even just think about an individual journalist, they are trying to write an article. I can't speak for everyone, but think about, a journalist is a writer, and they are writing with a purpose. They are writing to try and achieve something. And so it doesn't always equate to this neutral delivery of information. There can be spins to it. There can be certain stories that are, if you look, say, take a whole paper, the spread, the variety of what gets served to you in that paper is going to be biased by the paper itself as well. And it's going to be biased by, the community that you're in it and so on. So anyway, I'm saying all of this because I remember when I was younger, I used to be criticized for not watching the news myself. I was lucky that when I was young, I would spend a lot of time with people who were older than me because I was a gym instructor. And so a lot of my members at the gym and a lot of the people I taught were people older than me. And it gave me these great perspectives. And with that, I had people telling me, and, also in med school and things like that, I had people telling me that it's a bad thing to not watch the news for, many reasons, as you're saying. But you want to, I choose a very intentional news outlet to follow. There's some that I particularly follow on social media because of the seemingly unbiased, I probably couldn't dare to say that, the less biased nature that it seems to be delivered with, and also the lack of dramatization that seems to be associated. It's kept to very clean facts. So yeah, I think subtracting, if anybody's making you feel, if the two of us have sort of been, guilted or shamed for not watching the news, I hope this gives you guys permission to avoid the news, because not only is it an energy, a costly energy activity, isn't it, to watch the news and see all the dramatization and devastation that may or may not be relevant to us, but then also the time it takes to sit through, a half an hour or 60-minute program. If your purpose is to stay informed, is there a better way for you to do that? Is there a way for you to do that that's going to achieve your goals, that's not also going to take you so much time and take your energy with that? And also just recognizing, these big media outlets, they aren't necessarily the source of truth. They aren't necessarily neutral and unbiased. And so I guess this is a little bit of a tangent, but I just think the moral obligation that people kind of put onto you to watch the news can stop you from executing on this time-saving healthcare habit. And instead, especially today with the internet, there are so many other news outlets that can provide what you want in a more relevant, unbiased, and also less energy draining way. So I just wanted to echo that as well. I couldn't agree with that more. And in general, advertisements on TV, when I notice them in, if we're in a bar or a hotel or something like that, and the TV's on in the background, I just notice how captivating it is. Or in the residence rooms or the tea rooms in the hospital, it's so captivating. It just grabs my attention. And so I think about how, even in a very busy environment like the hospital, and particularly it's easy to think about work and things there. Even there, the TV can grab your attention because it's so powerful. So the impact of turning the TV off at home seems profound. And I'm so glad that TV is becoming less and less of the norm for our generations.
Yeah, that you can have an intentionality to it. And I think that's such an interesting thing as well, that I think some of the criticism that you can get is that you don't care about the rest of the world. And I just don't take that on board. But I think becoming a nervous wreck because of a war that I can do nothing about, that's not going to help my patients in clinic or me or anyone around me, or I think we just have to, like you say, not sort of get too wrapped up in that story either. But what I noticed, just like you're saying, is because I have kind of detoxed from the news over many years, suddenly when I'm exposed to it like that, and it is very captivating, very quickly I understand the difference between having not watched it and watched it, and I get that kind of anxiety feeling, and I'm like, oh, what is this? And I'm like, oh, it's the news. because I don't watch it, I notice it when I do. Yeah. And in a similar vein, I guess that brings us to number 2 on our list of things, is not only getting rid of the news or choosing a more intentional news outlet that doesn't spark so much emotion and takes less time to consume, like Becc was saying, is kind of evaluating other negative influences in your life. And that does include some people, which, again, it doesn't sound like a very nice thing to do, but I can really think of some people in my life who aren't in my immediate, sphere, but perhaps in a working environment where when I'm around them, it just takes something from me. And they don't even have to be a bad person. So obviously the people with sort of narcissistic undertones to their personality can do that almost in an intentional way, and I've definitely experienced that. But then there's other people who I don't even know what it is, but they just vacuum my energy out of me when they're with me, and I just have to understand that happened, and make conscious choices around how my energy is on any one day, and choose where I'm going to go with that energy and who I'm going to spend time with, and just do that from a kind but unapologetic place where you sort of prioritize yourself. That one sounds horrible to say out loud, but I share it more from a it's a hard truth. And especially for myself, I would identify as a very empathic person. So I wonder if I'm more vulnerable to these kind of experiences, but maybe not. Maybe we all are. What would you say to that one, Becc?
First, can I just circle back to the news? Because I agree with the position of we're in a very privileged position to be able to say, we're in a very privileged position to be able to not pay attention to, if we choose to, the news and these awful things happening in the world, like the wars and all of the injustice and all of the discrimination and all of the oppression. And also, what we would encourage you to do is, if you're compelled to watch the news for those reasons because you want to be informed, we want you to do, as Kristeen is suggesting, notice what behaviors you're taking that are different and positive as a result of you watching the news. If you're choosing to watch the news or expose yourself to anything in life, not just the news, but if you're choosing to do something because you've been told, well, I need to be informed because, finish that sentence. What are you going to do differently? If this is going to be something you're investing in, whether it's a difficult investment because it's hard work or because it's taking your energy or because, there's some kind of, or it's just taking your time. If you're investing in something, make sure it's actually creating the change that you want in your life. And if you're just using the reason of watching the news because you should, out of obligation, but it's not actually changing your behavior in the way that you want to change it, that's when we really want to give you an opportunity to say what good is really coming from this. And what you might want to change is actually, I want to continue to be exposed to these things, and I'm recognizing I'm not making the changes that I want to make from it. I'm not using that to create change in my life, but use those things that are difficult to look at, use them to actually propel you to be the person that you want to be. Make sure that that investment for you actually translates into the change that you want to see in the world. But don't just do it out of obligation. That's just creating less goodness in the world. It's creating more pain and suffering in the world. So, evaluating the negative influences in your life. That really grabbed me when you're like, it makes me feel like, I'm just paraphrasing here, when you're like, it feels like a terrible thing to do. Especially because, I know we both work off the understanding that when people are being negative in their lives, it's often because they're suffering, and with that, they could really use somebody like us, perhaps, or anybody who's willing to be more compassionate and kind and loving with them. And so it can kind of feel like it goes against our values in that way. And also, we want to look similarly at the net effect of us choosing to invest in these people. Because I know people like you, Kristeen, you just want to scoop up and cuddle up every person who you can who's suffering or feeling any pain in the world ever. And you want to take full responsibility for nurturing them back to their ideal self. Like, that is just you. Classic you. And I watch you doing this sometimes. I just want to but Kristeen, you don't have time. Don't have the energy, come back to me. And it's sort of like, I just really like that you're highlighting this, especially as something that I know would have been a journey for you to come on. You would have been through, I know you've been through the battle of trying to help everybody that you come across, and every single person, even if, they are causing mass destruction around you and even to you, you still want to help that person. And I know you've been through this painful journey of having to recognize, sometimes my investment, the net effect of my investment is not only zero, it's not only that it has no beneficial effect on that other person, but it's actually negative because it's taking from me. It's taking from my ability to take care of myself, is probably the worst case scenario. But also with that, it's taking from you being able to invest in other people who really want to be helped or be changed or experience something different. And so I think what you're saying is just a really sophisticated, nuanced perspective of recognizing it's not, we can never predict what's going to happen in the future. We can never predict what effect what we do is going to have another person. We can never even understand why anybody's doing what they're doing and whether they're ready for change or not. We can't predict that. But we have to be respectful of our own energy to say, well, in this case, the more I give to this person, it ends up in that net negative. And then for those people, when we actually value our own energy, when we actually care about ourselves, then we can make these more nuanced decisions like you're making to say, well, actually, for the overall good of the world, because I'm counting myself, I'm counting how I feel, I'm counting my energy, I'm counting my experience in this equation, it's better for me to not be around that person. And with coaching, we always want to strive to be unaffected is the ideal place. I am striving to be unaffected by these people, such that I could stand in a room with people basically, doubting me and berating me or saying no to me. But I'm like, no, I'm staying in this room because I've got some business to do in this room. I've got some world changing to do here. So I don't care what you say, I'm staying here. And also, we know that that is idealistic. And I know that even with all the work that I've done over the years, there are people who, when I'm around them, they make me more likely to have more negative thoughts about myself or more negative thoughts about the future or my goals or my plans, or just to be less secure and less positive or focused in my thoughts, less of the person that I want to be. And I've got two choices there. I can use that opportunity to expend energy and do the work to investigate that and overcome that. That's one option, and I take that a lot of the time. But I'm not going to take it every single day. I want to reserve my energy for other high-level executive tasks, for other self-awareness and self-improvement activities. I don't want to just constantly be working on being comfortable around these people. I've got limited resources. And so I just really like the nuance that you've brought to this option. And it's a great thing to make it an option for people to recognize not only when you're overgiving and it's not creating a net positive, but also just when, if you've got a choice to be around somebody and it's not easy to be your best self around them, it can really tax your energy to not be your best self. So I really like that time-saving self-care practice.
Yeah, and there's so much in that. And thank you for saying all of that. You really sort of broadened it up so it sounded more, I guess, intentional, right? Intentionality. Because some days those same people, I might lean into them for a little bit, like in an intentional way, to see. But you're right. I think you make that decision after repeated events when you are getting that net negative, like you're literally, your input is futile. They're going to be who they are. They're never going to be happy. Like, there's nothing you can do. So like you say, you might as well conserve said energy to spend on someone else. Like, it's not that you're not going to be a nice person and invest in people and their potential. It's just that you're just being intentional. And I just love, I think intentionality and choosing how you show up in the world, it's an absolute luxury and a privilege. But it also, it's, I guess in our audience, I'd say most people in our audience, there is a choice there. Most people who are listening to this are in that position where you have a lot of choices and you can put this intentionality into your life. But there's so many emotional heartstrings that can be pulled that might make you think that you're not allowed to, or it's not okay to. So by being very authentically expressing this, I feel like the last couple of things I've said are I feel like we could get a lot of trolls, but please don't troll us. Please hear this in the manner that is intended to be, just to say that we identify as being very good people who do pour a lot into others and do have a positive influence in the world and do care about lots of things going on in the world. And equally, what's also true is that we make these intentional choices with our energy, so we can spend our energy in a good way, and you should too. Yeah.
Well, it's very easy to criticize people for the choices that we make with the limited resources we have. And the truth is that we can always do more. And another truth is that other people have different values to ourselves. And another truth is that we are, of course, in very privileged positions. we're all doing the best that we have, the best that we can with what we have right now. And a way that doesn't create more good in the world, in my experience, is obligation and shame. You know, obligation and shame might move people to action in the short term, but this kind of willingness to, what we're really talking about here is, as you're saying, intentionality. We're talking about looking at what choices you're making and making sure you're making them from reasons that you like, as opposed to making choices because, you know, you just think you should. You think you should tolerate being around this person. You think you should accept, like, let them do whatever they're doing. You think you should watch the news. But when you when you make those choices from a place of shoulds, and you just do them on sort of automatic by default, by like that, instead of considering what is the net outcome of this choice, is the net outcome negative or is it positive? Whatever your version of positive is in the world. And another thing that you've highlighted from, you know, these points is that we don't often take our own energy into account in terms of that equation of, is this creating a net positive? If something is draining your energy, if choosing these things is draining your energy, and it's also not creating any positive action in the world, it's just, so it's not affecting anybody's behavior, it's not affecting any change, but it's draining your energy, that is a net negative. You know, there are so many good things that you do in the world, and there are so many people that you affect with that good energy, but you can't do it when you're constantly exhausted, and then you end up burnt out, and then you end up depressed. So this is a very delicate conversation to have, and it is one that does highlight our privilege. And also, we're sharing this conversation with you guys who also share this level of privilege too. And with that, we have difficult choices to make, and it's easier to just not look at the choices that we're making at all and do them on default. So they're our two of our time-saving, energy-producing self-care activities for people who are busy, like you clinicians, like us clinicians. What's our third one, Kristeen?
Well, I was just going to say, when we brainstormed this podcast, we didn't actually think we were going to get into this heavy, heavy chit chat. We thought it was going to be like one of those our top tips situations. And I don't know where, I mean, I actually am really enjoying this conversation, but we've gone down a path now. But we're going to just make it nice and light now. Now we've got a list of very enjoyable, easy peasy, doesn't affect anyone in your world, isn't controversial at all things. Beck, do you want to pick your favorite from the list?
It actually doesn't. It doesn't feel. It feels like we're transitioning to a different world.
Now we're going to tell you to light a candle. All right. So if you just do that when you get home, light a candle immediately.
A very uncontroversial candle. Don't use a controversial candle.
That is legit the next thing on the list. There's candles. There's music, relaxing music, or happy music. There's also showering off the day. See, we did not intend to get into a heavy chat, but we cannot help ourselves. That's what's happening here. You cannot transition from where we went to candles, music, and just have a shower where you're in the moment. We can't. It's impossible.
So because what we talked about so far feels like it's taken a different turn from what we intended, we'll put our last little point in a bundle. But I actually think that highlighting those two, they're really controversial. And I think before we spoke out our reasoning behind these choices, we didn't actually appreciate how controversial these 2 points are, which, you know, I like them for that reason, not because I think that we're right in these choices, but I just like that they're choices that we've made at this point in our life with the information that we have at this moment, and with being people who've been careful to recognize, we have a big impact that we both want to have on the world. Our energy is precious. And also, I've definitely found that my energy is quite fragile. I've been exhausted. So many times I've been, for me personally, I've been clinically depressed and I have been suicidal. So this isn't something that I take lightly when it comes to, making decisions about where we put our attention in the world. I know that where I put my attention and how I fill my mind and how I, the people that I choose to be around does make a big difference in my life. And when you make these choices, even when other people don't agree with them, but when you make these choices from a place that is A, from love for yourself, B, from a respect for your time and energy, the value of your time and energy, and with that, an understanding of what you can do for the world in your way with that time and energy, then you get an opportunity to make these choices that aren't just from obligation and that aren't coming from a fear of the shame that you'll feel on the other side of them. And so I'm really hoping that these choices will, we started with an episode that was just going to be about a more efficient way to take care of yourself, for these busy people who don't have time for the 30-minute bubble baths. But actually, what we've brought up is making decisions that go against the crowd and decisions that classically or, commonly in our society can actually evoke shame because people have suggested in the past that these are decisions that are not good decisions. And I really like that for our listeners. And probably where we want to end is emphasizing that these are really great prompts for you. We're not suggesting that these are things that you should definitely do. However, for both of us, these have been very positive changes that have gone against the grain a little bit. And maybe this is something that you could experiment with in your life and really keep in mind the reason that you're doing it, not just based on the obligation or wanting to avoid the shame of not doing it, but think about the net effect. Is this creating a net positive effect in the world? And do not forget to factor in your very precious time and energy, which is otherwise used to create that goodness elsewhere in the world.
Becc for president, I say. Becc for president. And thank you so much for listening. And I guess I just want to acknowledge that this is a completely, quite clearly unscripted podcast. If you needed proof, this was the episode. Thank you so much for joining us. We love hanging out with you. We hope this impacts you in some way. And if you have a strong feeling about this or any feeling about this, you want to counter opinion this, we actually do want to hear from you. That doesn't scare us at all. Please feel free to respectfully disagree or agree. Just let us know in the comments below. We would love to continue the conversation. This feels like an important one.
See you next time.
I've been waiting all my life for something. I've been down the darkest roads and up